I'm someone who enjoys solitude. Always have. There's something peaceful about being completely alone out in the woods. No phones, no voices, no pressure, just nature and the sound of your own footsteps. I've been doing solo weekend hikes for years, and up until 2016, I'd never had a reason to be afraid. That changed one fall weekend in October. I live in a small town with a stretch of woods just a few miles south. There's a trail there I go to often, but I'm not even sure it's an official one. I've never seen it on any maps. In all the years I'd been hiking and camping out there, I hadn't seen a single other person. That's part of what made it feel like my own secret place. That Friday, I threw together my gear on impulse. No big prep. I just had the itch to get out. I grabbed my backpack, filled it with food, fire tools, some basic protection, and headed out in the late afternoon. I parked along a gravel turnout by the woods and hiked in maybe 2 hours. This forest isn't mountainous, just a flat expanse of dense trees that seem to grow tighter the deeper you go. I've got a favorite little spot at the end of a deer trail. Flat, quiet, and just remote enough to feel like another planet. I got to the clearing about an hour before sunset, set up my tent, gathered firewood, built a small pit, and got it going before night fell. As always, once the flames caught, I felt that familiar peace wash over me. I sat by the fire, snacked on some trail mix, and let the calm settle in. And then, as if someone flipped a switch, the woods went quiet. No birds, no breeze, just that kind of stillness that feels too heavy to be natural. It didn't bother me at first. I'd noticed it before. Forests get quiet at night. It's just how they are. But then, I heard music. It came from far off in the woods, faint, hollow, like it was coming through a tunnel of trees. It sounded like classical music, something orchestral, but played on what I swear was an old vinyl record. I could even hear the faint scratch of it looping. I froze. It didn't sound like a radio or a phone. It had that weird old world quality, too echoey, too steady. For a while, I stayed seated, listening, trying to figure out if it was real. Maybe someone else was camping nearby. Maybe they were just enjoying some strange music choices, but it never stopped. The same melody looped over and over. No voices, no talking, no firelight, just that music drifting between the trees. After about 30 minutes, I gave in to curiosity. Or maybe it was unease. Either way, I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the sound. I didn't go far before the hairs on my neck stood up. The forest felt wrong. The deeper I walked, the more claustrophobic it became. The trees closed in. My footsteps felt too loud. My flashlight barely reached past the trunks. And still, the music played. I started to wonder if I was walking in circles. The song was getting louder, but I saw no camp, no lanterns, nothing. Just darkness and that eerie melody. My palms were sweating. My breathing was shallow. Then I saw it. An old stereo speaker, just sitting in the middle of the forest floor, half hidden behind a tree. One of those big clunky ones from the early 2000s, with a dusty LCD screen and rubber buttons. No cords, no generator. I walked up slowly. No signs of anyone nearby. No tracks. No footprints. Just that speaker. I turned it off. Silence slammed into me like a wave. The sudden absence of sound made the woods feel even more unnatural. I turned back and made my way to camp, moving faster now, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. When I got back, the fire was still burning, but the air felt colder, like someone had been there while I was gone. I sat down, trying to calm my nerves, but something was wrong. I scanned my gear. Some of it was missing. My knife, my pepper spray, my matches, cooking utensils, all gone. I jumped to my feet, heart hammering in my chest. That was no accident. Someone had been in my camp. And then I heard it again. The music. This time it was closer. I didn't think. I stuffed what I could into my bag, stomped out the fire, and booked it down the trail. My flashlight bounced wildly with each step. The trees seemed to close in, but the music started to fade behind me. I was getting away, until I saw something lying ahead on the dirt path. It was my stuff. The missing gear, knife, pepper spray, everything, laid out neatly in a line across the trail like some twisted offering. I stopped cold. Then, footsteps. Behind me. I didn't look back. I bolted. I ran so hard my legs burned. Branches cut at my arms. My lungs screamed. But I didn't stop. I didn't stop until I saw my car. I threw open the door, locked it, and sat there in the driver's seat, shaking, waiting for something, anything, to come crashing out of the trees. But nothing did. To this day, I don't know what happened. I don't know who or what was out there. But it wasn't just watching me. It wanted me to know it was there, and I haven't stepped into those woods again since. This happened just 2 weeks ago. It was the first backpacking trip of the summer for me, something I'd done dozens of times over the years. I was heading out to a 2-day trail loop in northeastern Wyoming. Quiet, scenic, routine. Nothing about it raised red flags. I parked my car at the trailhead, which was totally empty, and began my hike. The first several hours went smoothly. It was silent out there. No other hikers, no wildlife really. I had about 3 miles left before I'd pass the first campsite, though I wasn't staying there. My plan was to go 2 more miles past that and set up camp there for the night. Around that time, I stopped for a quick break. I found a good spot along the trail to sit and have a snack. Just a granola bar, some water. I wasn't planning to stay long. That's when I saw him. Across the trail, maybe 30 or 40 feet into the trees, there was a man. He wasn't walking. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, dead still, staring at me. I hadn't heard any footsteps. No signs of anyone nearby until I happened to look up. It made my skin crawl instantly. He lifted his hand and gave this strange, stiff wave, like he was trying to seem friendly, but it came off completely robotic. There was no smile, no emotion, just a slow, lifeless gesture. I immediately stood up and got back on the trail. I didn't want any part of that. Maybe he was harmless. Maybe he was just some guy hiking solo like me. But something about him didn't sit right. I don't know why he was standing that far off trail. I don't know how long he'd been watching me. I didn't say anything. I just left. The next 3 miles were slower. My mind kept drifting back to him. Every time the trail curved or dipped, I found myself glancing behind me, but I didn't see him again. Not yet. Eventually, I reached the first campsite, the one I was just passing through, but I decided to take a longer break there. My earlier stop had been cut short, and I was hungry. I unpacked my little propane cooker and heated up some water for a freeze-dried meal. As I stirred the food and waited for it to be ready, I heard footsteps coming down the trail. I turned. It was him. He stepped into the clearing like he belonged there. Black hair, short beard, gray flannel, blue jeans, looked mid-30s to early 40s, and he was smiling, wide, deliberate, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. He greeted me casually, like we were old friends, started making small talk. Beautiful trail, huh? How far are you hiking? You out here alone? I gave short answers, hoping he'd get the hint, but he didn't. He walked over and sat next to me, too close. He was friendly, but it felt wrong. Aggressively friendly, like he was forcing a role. Nothing about him felt genuine. The questions kept coming, personal stuff, what I was eating, where I was staying, whether I was camping alone. I tried to focus on my food, but then he pulled something out of his backpack, a protein bar. The wrapper was already torn open. No bites were taken, but he offered it to me, saying I needed better nutrition than homeless food. I declined, obviously, but he kept pushing it toward me, saying I'd thank him later, saying he always brings extras for people who don't plan right. Eventually, he gave up and said, "No worries, I'm staying at this camp tonight. You'll probably be hungry later. I'll give it to you then." That sentence made my blood run cold. I didn't want to stay anywhere near this guy. I finished my food, packed up, and told him I had to meet a friend at the next site. Total lie, but I didn't care. I stood up fast, not giving him time to talk me into anything. His smile never left his face, but his eyes were empty, like he was wearing a mask. I walked fast, checking over my shoulder more than once. He didn't follow, at least not right away. By the time I reached my planned site, the sun was starting to set. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. But I didn't set up camp right away. Something told me to wait. I kept my pack closed. I stayed alert, and thank God I did. Barely 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps again, leaves crunching softly under heavy boots. He emerged from the trail like it was the most normal thing in the world. Same grin, same weird energy. This time I lost my cool. I asked, seriously, "Are you following me?" He just laughed and said, "Yeah, I'm following you," like it was a joke. But it wasn't funny. His grin stayed frozen. He started asking if I was hungry again, reaching into his bag like he still had that damn protein bar ready. I didn't respond. I grabbed my pack and turned around. I didn't wait. I just left. I backtracked fast, didn't look back. I passed the first campsite again, and I didn't stop. I hiked for another mile or more, adrenaline carrying me. Eventually, I veered off the trail. Maybe 200 or 300 feet in, I found a dense patch of trees and set up my tent discreetly. I kept everything packed, ready to move. I crawled into my tent, heart still pounding. Despite the fear, I eventually fell asleep. My body was too tired not to. But sometime during the night, I woke up. Footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate crunching on the leaves near the trail. My heart felt like it stopped. I laid completely still, listening. The footsteps grew louder, then faded. They moved past me. He didn't see my tent. I stayed silent until dawn. The moment light broke through the trees, I packed up everything and hiked out fast. I didn't stop until I was back at my car. I never saw him again, but I can't stop thinking about the protein bar. Why was it open? Why was he so pushy about me eating it? What would have happened if I had? I think he had some seriously dark intentions, and I think I barely avoided something I'd never come back from. Back in the summer of 2019, I was solo camping about an hour north of Fairbanks, Alaska, near the White Mountains. I'm an experienced outdoorsman, and I'd been hiking this remote trail system for years. That weekend, I was doing a 2-day solo trip, nothing major, just a peaceful escape from my phone, my job, and people. By the second day, I'd settled into a good rhythm. My camp was already set up, a single-person tent in a cleared patch surrounded by dense pine and birch trees. I had a good campfire going and was heating up some food by early afternoon when something caught me off guard. A man stepped out from the trees. I hadn't heard any footsteps, no crunching of leaves, nothing. He just appeared, like he'd materialized from the forest. He looked like a typical backpacker, gear, boots, hydration pack, mid-30s maybe, kind of expressionless, but polite enough. He asked if I knew where the cabin was. Now, I'd never used any cabins out here myself, but I did know there were old public use shelters along some of the side trails. Most were run down, and first come, first serve. I remembered seeing a thin path branching off near my site, and I figured it probably led to one of those. I told him there might be a cabin down that trail, and he nodded, thanked me, and walked away. That was it. I didn't think much about it. Just figured I was no longer alone on the mountain, which was surprising. I'd seen zero wildlife, let alone people, in 2 days. But nothing felt off. Not yet. That night, I sat by the fire enjoying the sound of wind rustling through the trees. It was around 9:30 p.m., but it never really gets pitch dark that time of year in Alaska. The sun hovered just below the horizon, casting long shadows and that eerie golden glow through the trees. Then I saw movement. A figure was coming out of the woods. It was the same man. He walked up to the edge of the firelight, and his face was just as blank as before. No smile, no confusion, just stillness. He said he couldn't find the shelter. Claimed the trail I pointed out led nowhere. I frowned. That didn't make sense. The trail was clearly visible. He must have missed it somehow, or maybe he'd taken a wrong turn. I tried explaining again, gesturing to where I'd seen the path, but he didn't seem interested in hearing directions. He wanted me to show him. He said he didn't have a tent, that he was relying on the cabin for shelter tonight. His tone wasn't desperate, but firm, a little too firm, like he expected me to say yes, and against my better judgment, I did. I strapped on my backpack, took a flashlight, and led him through the woods. He walked behind me the entire time, silent, never making conversation. I kept glancing back, trying to read his face in the dim light, but he gave me nothing. 10 minutes later, we reached the trail, the same one I saw 2 days ago, and even from where we stood, I could see the shelter through the trees, far off, but there. It was real, not a figment of my memory, but the man shook his head. "That's not it," he said flatly. I stared at him, confused. I told him it was the only cabin in the area. We walked closer anyway. The building was small, weather-worn, the wood rotted at the edges, and the windows cracked. Definitely abandoned, but still standing. That's when I realized something. He'd stopped walking. I turned and saw him standing about 10 feet behind me, completely still, holding a knife at his side. His voice was empty, flat. "Go inside." I asked him what the hell he was doing, but he just repeated himself. "Go in." The forest was dead silent. My breath was loud. My adrenaline was pumping. My instincts told me exactly what would happen if I stepped into that cabin. So instead, I ran. I dropped my bag, turned on my heel, and sprinted. Branches clawed at my arms as I barreled through the woods. I didn't stop until I was deep into the darkness, far from the shelter trail. I found a thick grove of trees and ducked into the underbrush, crouching low and trying to stay quiet. I stayed there, heart racing, for at least 30 minutes. Eventually, I crept back toward where the shelter was, slowly, quietly. The man was gone. So was my backpack. I cursed myself. I dropped it so I could run faster, but now all my gear was in his hands. My food, my phone, my wallet, my car keys, everything. I turned and began walking the long way back to my camp, keeping to the shadows. Every branch that cracked made me flinch. Every gust of wind made me stop and listen. When I finally reached the campsite, my stomach dropped. There was a fire burning. I hadn't left one. My tent was still standing, and my bag was sitting in the center of the camp, right by the fire. I froze. I scanned the trees. Nothing. I stepped a little closer, trying to decide if this was some twisted setup. Why return the bag? He had everything. Why lure me back here? Then, without warning, he emerged. He walked calmly out of the darkness and into the firelight, tossed another stick onto the fire, sat down, and began humming, like this was his camp now, like he'd just been waiting. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I turned around and walked silently into the forest, this time heading toward the main road. It was hours away on foot, but I didn't care. I hiked through the dark with no food, no water, just the feeling that I'd narrowly avoided something horrific. I finally flagged down a passing truck near dawn, told them a half-lie, that I'd gotten lost. I didn't want to deal with the questions, but later that morning, I called the authorities. Rangers and state troopers went back to check the area, They found nothing. No man, no fire, no backpack, not even the stones from the fire pit. It was like no one had ever camped there. They confirmed the cabin was part of an old, discontinued shelter program, abandoned and unmonitored. Whatever that man's plan was, I'm convinced I was one decision away from never walking out of those woods. I still solo camp from time to time, but never in that area, and never without a second exit plan.